So, all right. So before me and my team gets into it, I'll start off with just a few quick words. We've had a great experience working with Coltura this quarter, working with our sponsor. Before we get started with our presentation, the findings that we've had throughout this quarter, we'll hear a few words from professor of this class, as well as Coltura. So Fred, if you want to say a few words first.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm Fred Pursell. I teach at the University of Washington, and I'm an instructor in the program of the environment, which is a very popular interdisciplinary initiative within the School of Environmental Science. It seems lots of students here at the university are very passionate and committed to making the world a better place. And so my course is sustainability consulting. And the premise is that we bring the real world into the classroom by having the students form teams and then engaging with clients for 10 weeks on working with them to solve a strategic business challenge. And so the students will be delivering their work as a presentation, but there is a body of research and analysis and data that's underlying that. Just a word about the client. The theme for this quarter's course is decarbonization of the economy. And so getting in touch with CoMotion, which is the university's incubator, we discovered there was a great opportunity to engage with an entrepreneur and a startup that is focused on the challenge of converting super gas users to electric vehicle owners. And so tremendous opportunity to move the needle, work with an organization that's very innovative and is driving change. So with that, I'll invite the executive director up to say a word.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. So this event is happening at Startup Hall, the University of Washington campus. And startup really brings people together. So I'd just like to introduce the person who actually brought Coltura and the program on the environment together, Carolina Hansen. And Carolyn, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I am the manager of Startup Hall. We are one of 3 incubators on campus. So CoMotion is the innovation hub for the University of Washington. And part of our work is there are 3 incubators. We here at Startup Hall, we're the technology incubator, but in Fluke Hall across campus, we also run a hardware space and a life science space. And in this space, I have about 42 companies right now, 90 members. And we are always looking at ways to partner with people on campus. So our program is open beyond campus researchers and staff and faculty. So we attract people like Matthew from outside of the university for this very reason, that we can connect them with programs on the campus to hire talent, but also to connect with programs like this one. So Fred reached out to our program and I immediately thought of Matthew, so connected Matthew in, and I'm just, my heart is warmed by seeing programs like this go on. And like we do programs like this with Foster. We work with engineering a lot, but we've also done programs with the drama department. I'm looking at doing something with the art department. So I'm always looking about cross-departmental work, and I appreciate your work in supporting Matthew today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks again. Can you put my deck up?
Oh yeah, I can get that up. Yeah. Set the tab over.
Second, let me go on. Yeah. Thanks, Callum. So this project is about gasoline superusers, and superusers are the people in the top 10% in the country for gasoline consumption. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about superusers and what they mean for the environment, for America, those kind of things. So 20% of US carbon emissions comes from burning gasoline in light duty vehicles. So it's just about the largest carbon burning source in our economy. So it's very, very important that we start to shrink that down as fast as possible. So one day I was talking to this gentleman, his name is Severo Lopez. He's a drywaller, and he was telling me how he drives all over Washington State to get to his job. So he drives over 600 miles a week, and he fills his tank up a couple times a week, 2-3 times a week, just to get to his jobs. And it's a very major expense for him. And this is my mom on the day that she got an EV. And so my mom, I think this car now is a 2018 and it's got, I think, 7,000 miles on it. But she benefited from all the tax incentives and things like that, that they just came right off the price. So that was good. But it got us thinking about the relative use of gasoline between someone like Severo and my mom. And so on the left here, you'll see that's how much gasoline that Severo uses in a year. And this is on the right is how much gasoline my mom used in a year. And then this is over 5 years, it really starts to add up the difference. And so so we investigated this concept, and we found some data sources that enabled us to calculate the gasoline consumption for Americans. And so what we found is that the people in the top 10% for gasoline consumption, those are the people that are depicted in the red bar there. They're the people we call gasoline superusers. They use 35% of the gasoline that's used in the United States. And so the United States actually uses 35% of all the gasoline that's used in the world. So roughly almost 3 times that of China, and much more than Europe or anything like that. But then when we look at gasoline superusers, so gasoline superusers use about 10.4% of the gasoline in the world. So this is 21 million Americans using as much as nearly as much as all of China, more than the European Union. So this is a relatively small population that's using vast amounts of gasoline. So trying to get our arms around that and how we can get those gasoline superusers converted to EVs is a very, very important question for the environment. It's also an important question just for equity in the United States, because a lot of people have no choice as to how much that they drive. And people in the lower income brackets, people earning, let's say, less than $50,000, as you can see on the graph, they're spending well over 10% of their income on gasoline if they're gasoline superusers. So it can be a very heavy burden on people just paying for gasoline. So Coltura has lots of data that we've been able to acquire, and so we've been able to kind of target them and locate them and figure out who is a superuser, where they are, and so yeah, we have lots and lots of data on them. And this map just shows some of the ways that we can calculate and depict where superusers are. And one thing that we found earlier this year was that the public is actually very receptive to cost savings messages on about gasoline and EVs. And so there was a test run on this, and people were exposed to a cost savings testimonial message from an EV driver who drives high mileage. And what we found is that just a control group, people before they were exposed to this message, 45% of them would recommend an EV to their friend or family member. But once they were exposed to that cost savings message, it went up to 75%. So we saw a lot of opportunity here for targeting super users with these cost savings messages. And so that's where I'll turn it over to our great team from University of Washington. They're going to talk about what they did and what they found.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'll get it back over to our slides for this. Yeah, so this quarter we've been working side by side with Coltura as well as in our classroom to develop this report and learn about these super users, how we can target to them. We'll start off with a brief introduction, who we all are. We'll get into agenda and then run through kind of what we found throughout this quarter. Just to start off, my name is Callum Mitchell. I'm a junior here at the University of Washington studying environmental studies. And on this project, I focused on the research as well as the data analysis on the research that we did. Just come up and...
I'm Sophie. My majors are environmental studies and communication, and I was the writer and editor for this project.
I'm Deja Jackson. I'm also an environmental studies major, and I was a communications and project lead.
I'm Zola Untiveros. I am also a major in environmental studies, and I was the project manager.
I'm Z. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm Z. I'm also an environmental studies major, and I worked on the report and presentation design.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, so now we'll kind of go into what we'll be talking about today. We'll start off quickly just with an executive summary, moving into the problem statement, project development. We'll talk about our findings, what we found from the research that we did, as well as some recommendations that we have based off of the research that we generated. And then we'll have a quick wrap up and then a discussion or Q&A at the end. Sophie, if you want to start us off with the summary.
Yeah. So just a quick summary of what we're going to talk about today. The problems we were looking at. So Coltura is concerned with carbon dioxide emissions caused by gasoline usage in the United States. We already heard a brief introduction about super users, but those are the top 10% of gasoline users in the United States. They're super high mileage drivers. We used a benchmark of 15,000 miles or more driven per year. And they were an important group for us to look at because they have a lot bigger of an impact. In Coltura's super user report, they estimate that one super user converting to an electric vehicle would save about 5 times as much gas as a non-super user. So they're a very important group to look at and figure out what they think about electric vehicles. And their conversion would mean a lot. But the problem was that super users were not adopting electric vehicles as fast as would be necessary to meet certain climate goals. And our main job was to figure out why that was happening. And we did that by conducting 13 interviews between the 5 of us. We talked to majority super users, but also some recent car buyers, and we'll touch on why we did that a little bit later. But we developed a short questionnaire with a few different categories here just to kind of learn about our interviewees. We asked them about their background, learned about their demographics. We asked about their driving behaviors, how much they drive, what kind of car they drove, things like that. We also asked about their car buying behavior to understand what the process of them buying a vehicle looks like. We also asked about their information sources, where they get their news, things like that. And then finally, probably most important, we asked about their electric vehicle perceptions, just to gauge what their pre-existing thoughts were. And our findings generally pointed towards our interviewees being misinformed about electric vehicles. They had several common misconceptions that are listed up here. The first one being price. A lot of people saw that larger sticker price on electric vehicles and were kind of turned away by it. And we're not really taking into account the fact that they would be saving a lot of money on gas if they obviously weren't buying gas. So they weren't seeing that in the long run. And the second one was charging availability. A a lot of people thought that charging was not an option near them, but when we looked into it, we actually found that there was a fair bit of charging around people that they just weren't aware of. And then the final one was range. A lot of people were concerned about how far an EV battery could take them, which is becoming less of a concern because of advancing technology with cars. So those were some of the common things that we found. And our solutions comprise promoting education using existing data that Coltura has. You saw a little bit of it from Matthew. They have a ton of information on superusers, on gasoline usage. In their report, they talk about things like how much money superusers spend, how much of it they spend on gas, how much they could be saving if they converted to an electric vehicle, how much gas they could be saving. So kind of just pushing all of that data to bring people's electric vehicle understandings up to speed. And you'll see later, we have some graphics that we've drawn up that promote all of those things. So that's what you have to look forward to.
And then I'm going to be covering this section, and I'm really just going to be providing a background. Matthew already did a pretty good job with this, but I'm just going to reiterate some of the points that he covered. So gasoline consumption is deeply ingrained in American culture, with the US burning 370 million gallons daily, significantly more than any other nation in the world, including China. This heavy reliance contributes to 1/6 of US carbon emissions and imposes a financial burden of over $450 billion annually on American households. Despite climate objectives, gasoline usage is not decreasing at the required rate. The 21 million US gasoline superusers make up just 0.24% of the world's population, but they use more than 10.4% of the world's gasoline, nearly as much as all of China. This is where Coltura comes in. Coltura is primarily focused on addressing the environmental and public health concerns associated with gasoline and diesel vehicles. They advocate for a shift towards electric vehicles and other clean transportation alternatives to reduce air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and dependence on fossil fuels. Coltura's main concerns revolve around promoting policies and initiatives that accelerate the transition to electric transportation, such as incentives for EV adoption, phasing out the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles, and expanding charging infrastructure. Coltura's target audience are superusers, which were already introduced to all of you guys, and our involvement in this initiative regards conducting interviews with members within our close circles, condensing our findings from each transcript and interaction, and forming conclusions to better understand key avenues for marketing and how to best appeal to superusers.
So I'm going to share a little bit about the development of our project. As we kind of went over earlier, we focused on 5 different information sections. So our first one is background and development. The goal of this section was to gain an understanding of the demographic of our interviewee. So this could be something like type of car that you drive. I would say like age, employment, stuff like that, just to understand who this person is. Next, we have information sources. Once again, this is to gauge the digital location of where these participants are consuming news media. We thought this would be a great place to better understand where our participants are gaining their knowledge about EVs, but also where they're spending most time reading about news sources. We thought this would be really helpful, especially when we were focusing on our advertising campaign, so we know where to start marketing. We also have our driving patterns. This is to gather information about the frequency and range of vehicle usage. So this would be, where does most of your driving occur? How often do you spend more than 1 consecutive hour driving? Just things like that to better understand the patterns and behaviors of our super users. Next, we have buying behavior. So this is, once again, to gain a better understanding of the personal buying preferences of our super users. We focused on understanding why they chose the car that they did, and what factors influenced their car purchase. And so finally, we have our perception of EVs. This was to gain an understanding of our participants' experience and perception of electric vehicles. We did we tried to gauge their actual experience, both firsthand and with people that they know, with electric vehicles. So have you driven an EV? Do you know anyone who does drive an EV? This is just to address what is influencing these perceptions and the biases that they have. So when we were selecting our participants, a majority of them were super users that are close to us personally. We also selected recent car buyers. We chose to interview recent car buyers because they offer an interesting insight into the car buying process. We noted that a few of our interviewees had difficulties actually purchasing EVs. They were turned away from the concept entirely, which was pretty alarming, especially if someone is willing to, I guess, convert. We just wanted to understand why the barrier was put in place. So we chose to interview people who were close to us because we thought we could hopefully get more honest conversations, ask deeper questions, kind of dive into these specific topics that we're interested in. And so after we collected this data, we focused on analyzing our data, so noting any significant aspects, patterns, trends that emerged from our data. And we created a super user report where we go much more into specifics and our diagnoses of the issue.
So from this research, we came away with a couple of main ideas that most people categorize themselves into their objections. These concerns are with price, charging availability, and then the range of electric vehicles. It's important to note that every interviewee did cite at least one of these as a major objection, with charging availability being the most common among the interviewees. All of these link together with a common thread of misinformation. To some extent, there was misinformation with price, charging availability, and range, whether that be thinking electric vehicles are too expensive, thinking that chargers aren't available on your route, that's somewhere that's maybe a little bit more remote, or thinking that electric vehicles don't have the range that they actually offer, and it's kind of seeing that some of these things were about maybe 3 years behind, or they were just completely misinformed. Now I think we are going to do a quick little mock interview. So Z, who's on Zoom, she actually was a super user, or is a super user, and we actually interviewed her for our research as one of our participants in this. And Deja interviewed her. So I think Deja's going to come up and just kind of do a quick little minute or two to kind of show what these interviews look like and what the objections look like.
All right, so as we can tell, Z drives a 2008 Jeep Wrangler and roughly 443 miles every week. And just to get a better understanding of your driving pattern, where do you usually drive and how often?
I usually drive on freeways, and that's every day.
You cut out a little bit. Can you say that again?
Yeah, most of my driving occurs on freeways, and that's every day.
Where are you usually going?
I go to school and I go to my training facilities.
And you're doing that from Renton, right?
Yeah,
Starting at
so
Renton and then...
exactly. I drive from Renton to Seattle to the University of Washington, and then I drive from the University of Washington to like North SeaTac by the airport. And that's every day. And then on the weekends I coach. So, and I participate in other events. So I drive from like Renton to West Seattle because I coach in West Seattle, and then home, and then I drive basically back to like West Seattle or Pike Place because that's where most of my events take place. But yeah.
And how much would you say you spend on gas?
I calculated it roughly like 600 a month.
Okay. And we know that you've had a prior bad dealership experience. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my experience with EVs is pretty similar to everyone else that we've interviewed. It is pretty ingrained in misconceptions. Price being the number one, also preference. So I drive a Jeep, my whole family, we all have driven Jeeps. I grew up around Jeeps, so it's definitely a preference that I have that car. It's not convenient by any means, as you guys can tell, but a preference. So we weren't really considering electric vehicles at all. But then they came out with the Jeep hybrid, like the hybrid Jeep, and that kind of caught our attention initially. So we went to a couple dealerships, and like it was just a lot of work that we didn't think necessary. Like, for instance, if we wanted to actually drive one, we'd be at the dealership, but we'd have to call in to like a separate manufacturer or a separate location and request an appointment to have the car being like driven out or flown out to our location or location of our choosing. And then we could test drive it, but then that car would have to be shipped back. So like we couldn't even take that car home if we wanted it. We'd have to wait again. And like I know it doesn't sound like a lot, maybe we're just picky, but like that, we just didn't want to go through that process. And then also the hybrid, it wouldn't have been convenient for the range because I drive way more than I would get on the electric part of it anyways. So that's kind of where like the price misconception comes in, because in order to get like a fully electric vehicle, we thought that the price it wouldn't be worth it, it'd be too much. Not just like spending it upfront cost, but also we don't have a charger, so we'd have to get one at home. So just like a lot that we just thought was a hassle. So we kind of stopped thinking about it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. If you could pinpoint one factor, what would have been your biggest drawback in purchasing an EV?
Price.
All right,
Probably.
thank you.
Awesome, thank you for that. Now I'll kind of dive into more specifically some of the concerns, and we'll go through a couple of quotes that we've pulled from our interviews. The person that interviewed them will come up and share a little bit about what they found in the interview. But to start with price and availability, 7 of the 13 interviewees did note price as a major concern. We kind of lumped this in with availability. So kind of like Aziz was saying, you go to the dealership and there's not a car there for you, you're a little bit confused on how to get that. So kind of the sticker price on the electric vehicle being too high or not available. And then along with this, a lot of the super users were not aware of the potential gas savings that an EV would give them. So that was something really of note. And then we'll kind of move into our first quote here. Zola interviewed Ruben.
Yeah, so Ruben, he is 24 years old. He's a teacher from El Paso, Texas, and he is a recent car buyer. So I'm just going to read the quote and then we're going to break it down a little bit. I would have to say, first of all, the market price. Electric vehicles tend to be more expensive, especially if they're about the size of a normal vehicle. So Ruben chose his car specifically because of its capabilities. It's a larger truck, and he is specifically interested in finding a vehicle that is capable, is large, that can move him, his family, and everyone around, like based on his lifestyle. So with this quote, we kind of understand that Ruben is, he feels that electric vehicles cannot meet the demands of his lifestyle, which we've done some research. There are definitely models that could fit in. There are larger electric vehicles, but the price range does tend to be a little bit higher. So with this, we kind of suggested, once again, like looking into more options. There are definitely more affordable models. There are used electric vehicles. Just this would be something where just more research has to be done, unfortunately, by the car buyer, but hopefully we can spread awareness on the availability of these models.
Then next, I actually interviewed my brother. He drives about 16,000 miles a year, living in downtown Chicago, commonly doing long drives between, Chicago, Indiana, Wisconsin. And he actually previously owned an electric vehicle, had to get rid of it because there was no charging availability in the apartment where he had the car at. But then when buying another car, he still was considering an electric vehicle, also considering a plug-in hybrid. But he noted they're too expensive for any of the ones that they looked at, and there was just not a lot of availability. So this kind of just strikes right at the point of what we're getting at. Just concerned with the price, concerned with the availability. Even if the availability is increasing currently in the electric car market, prices have been decreasing over the last few years. Yeah, and then the other quote that I got is actually from my aunt from Olathe, Kansas. She's driving about 15,000 miles a year again, kind of doing those long drives, a lot of stuff between Kansas and Illinois, Kansas and Lake of the Ozarks. And this one was really interesting to me to kind of talk about the gas savings, where she was able to understand the gas savings, but still not ready to possibly make that switch, where she says that if she does the cost analysis on the amount of money that she's going to save on gas, you're saving so much, but getting out of the door with an electric car that is a more significant cost, that's too much of a hindrance to buying an EV. So she's understanding that, yes, maybe in the 5-6 years down the line, I'll be saving that $10,000 for the electric vehicle that I want, but going out of the door with a car that's, say, $60,000 rather than $50,000 is just hard to process in her brain when it's something that she's unfamiliar with, that she's not used to. So just kind of worried about that. Then moving into our next section, this is charging availability. This is the most common thing that we saw. This is both in apartments and on the road. So a lot of people are concerned with, all right, say I'm going to somewhere remote. If I'm in the middle of Texas, for example, we interviewed a lot of people from Texas. I'm in El Paso, I want to go somewhere. How am I going to be able to charge my car if I'm getting off of the interstate, if I'm not going to another city, for those long 200+ mile trips? Very worried about that issue. And Deja has a quote from her parents, or brother and sister, I should say.
Yeah, so here's a quote from Drod and Tom. Drod is my brother and Tom is his fiance. They're in their late 20s, and they said if we wanted to drive to California from Washington, that would make the trip a lot more logistically difficult. For some context, Tom's family lives in California, and they go to visit them a few times a year. And they're concerned that driving an EV would just add another layer of planning that comes with road trips. And the inconvenience of charging seems to be their biggest problem here.
So this is another quote that I had from my aunt as well. She notes a common drive for her is between Olathe and Lake of the Ozarks. That's about a 250-mile drive, kind of depending on where you're going to Lake of the Ozarks. But she'll be doing it fairly frequently. And she said that she didn't think that electric vehicle charging was available on that drive from Olathe to Lake of the Ozarks. When you look it up and you sort to the tier 3 electric chargers, something that's going to give you a faster charging, on both route options that are commonly available to getting to Lake of the Ozarks, you will see a number of chargers available on either route. You're never going to be going more than about 115 miles between charges there. So there is an availability for charging. It's just not commonly known where you're going to get that charging, how you're going to get that charging. Just a lot of confusion with what's going to happen once I get on that long drive.
Okay, so next, I interviewed Sarah. She's 48. She does a lot of driving back and forth for work. In addition to, she has children. She takes them to a whole bunch of different activities that adds up really quickly. So her quote is, I don't know if you've seen this Instagram reels of people in California. The charging stations have lines of 500 Teslas in it. I have not seen the video, but seems like 500 seems like a lot. I'm not sure if that's an exaggeration, but obviously there is the concern of limited availability. In El Paso, we do have charging stations. She does not currently drive an electric vehicle and is therefore not totally aware of all of the opportunities that she would have to charge her car. But it should be noted that this is a big barrier for her. She feels intimidated by this the potential for a lack of charging capabilities and the requirement of a bigger time investment. So as we know, electric vehicles, some of the fast charging options, that's still going to be about like 15 minutes to get a full charge. So this would be her hesitance to spend the time, wait in the line. Like this, I feel like this just means we need to address these gaps in knowledge, one in different charging capabilities, but also in availability in regions.
So now moving into the last objection that we saw commonly. This is 8 interviewees noting this as a concern. This is the range more so on a day-to-day basis. So you're say your 100 to 200 mile trip, you're spontaneous if you want to go from Bremerton to Seattle like Deja's parents want to do. If you are worried about stopping for a charge and it's late at night, if you want to, say you normally commute 150 miles a day and you want to go see your cousins that are another 15 miles away, are you going to be able to do that? How is that going to look? You're very trapped into the range of the vehicle. And if you charge it the last night, So Deja has a quote from her parents on this.
Yeah, so this quote is from Jerry and Larry. They're my parents. They live in Bremerton. And this quote is specifically from my mom. She said, "Imagine if I was driving to Seattle and it runs out of battery. I would have to stop halfway." And since my brother and I both live in Seattle, my mom will often take day trips to come over and see us. And because she's my mom, I know that she is concerned with even refueling by herself, especially at night. So I know that if she had to recharge an electric vehicle at night by herself in somewhere that she's not familiar with, she would avoid that situation at all costs. Yeah, let's move on to the next quote. Over.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so we did also see a few other objections. These showed up in two or more interviews that we saw. There was a couple of people worried about the cobalt extraction. Some people worried about the modernness of EVs, either them looking too sleek, worried about the touchscreen, just worried in general about, I've never driven an electric vehicle. This is something new to me. Other people citing a need for a gas vehicle, whether that be going to truly remote locations, wanting a manual to drive, and then other concerns about the longevity of the battery lifespan. So what happens in 15, 20 years, just not understanding what that's going to look like for them. And then this, just to kind of, I think this really well summarizes what we're getting at here. I interviewed my sister's friend who works for the Chicago Auto Show, the Chicago Trade Association. She's very familiar with the industry. She is a super user, driving about 15,000 miles per year, driving, or maybe a little bit more, but driving from Chicago to Oak Brook about 3 days a week. And I think this just really summarizes what we're trying to get at here. She says that I think there's a lot of education that still needs to happen. How do you pay for public charging that's not free? Who pays for that electricity? I don't think that it's very well understood, especially the cost difference when purchasing the vehicle. There's so many ifs, ands, and this and that. It's very confusing, even for somebody who works in the industry every day. And this is, to me, something that I think really captures it. It's a lot of confusion. It's a lot of misinformation. It's what's going to happen when I buy this electric vehicle? What's going to happen if my car dies in the middle of nowhere? What happens if I don't have a charger at my house? Am I going to need to buy a $2,000 converter port to my house? Obviously, these answers are available on the internet, but it's just not well known to a lot of people. And then also going into, she talked about the tax rebates and what are you going to get back from the government, noting that kind of changes a lot from place to place, person to person. And I think this just really well summarizes the need for understanding and trying to promote what does owning an electric vehicle look like on the day-to-day basis. Maybe not pointing out the environmental needs, maybe not just pointing out the cost savings that you're going to get, but what does it just even look like to own an electric vehicle, to buy an electric vehicle? And I think this really well summarizes what we're getting at. And now Deja can go into some of the recommendations that we had.
Yeah, so in order to address the three main concerns that we learned from the interviews we conducted, we recommend that Coltura uses visual Instagram advertisements to direct people to Coltura's website to use their resources. I created these visual ads with the intention to present a wide range of aesthetics and target demographics. So these first two ads are meant to address price concerns. The ad on the right highlights money-saving potentials for super users, and the ad on the left directs viewers. Oh, sorry. The ad on the right directs people to a Coltura article that presents the least expensive electric cars in 2024, and the ad on the left is meant to target rural super users and showcase that they can save money on their way to work during their commute. And these next two ads are also meant to address price concerns. The ad on the left, once again, highlights that super users can save by switching to an electric vehicle. And the ad on the right directs them to Coltura's EV savings calculator, which is an excellent tool. The next two ads are meant to address charging availability and range. So the ad on the left, once again, directs people to a Coltura article that provides great resources and tools to help them find charging stations near them or on their routes. And the ad on the left is meant to kind of address some misconceptions about batteries, and also directs them to a Coltura article titled "How Long Can Electric Car Batteries Last in 2024?" Now, the last two ads, they aren't inspired by the three main concerns. They're inspired by Coltura's message and identity. So the ad on the left is just meant to let people know how gasoline super users are defined. In the small text, it says, if you use more than 1,000 gallons of gasoline per year, you may be a super user, just to get the word out there of what a super user is. Because many people are super users and don't even know it. And then the ad on the right is inspired by Coltura's identity page, which shares the goal to raise awareness of the impacts of gasoline use, similar to the way the anti-smoking movement did. The quote in the ad is inspired by the common phrase used in the anti-smoking movement, in the battle against smoking, you can win. And those are all the visual advertisements I created for Coltura. And I'm going to have Sophie close out our presentation.
Yeah. So throughout the quarter working with Coltura, we've learned a lot about the impact that super users have, and the benefits that would come from them switching to electric vehicles. We also really delved into that information gap that we found that prevents them from doing so. We looked into all the reasons that they don't want to buy an electric vehicle, and we got a lot of insight from that, which is really cool. We also have determined that there's a big opportunity to close that gap through information, just sharing the things that we know to be true about electric vehicles. We're suggesting that Coltura does that for the future. And this is all important because a lot of harm is being done to the earth and the environment by carbon dioxide emissions from gasoline usage here in the United States. And Coltura is taking a step towards reducing that by creating their super user conversion machine to get people to switch from gas cars to electric, which has been a really cool project to be a part of. We're all super grateful to Matthew and the rest of Coltura for working with us. Thank you.
Now I think we'll go into a little Q&A for anyone that has any questions. Start here. I think we'll also open up to Zoom.
You should investigate any of these structural barriers going on. So somebody goes to the dealership buying an electric car, and they're not quite sure they want another car. The dealer is going to push them to a gas car because dealers don't make all their way to solve the part. They make significant amount of maintenance. And the gas cars don't have much maintenance, so they don't make much money to solve electric cars. There's also a financing problem that people who say are getting out of prison, if they want to go buy a basic car, they can't get financed for it. They can't get financing to buy an electric car, which costs half a lot more, so there's financial barriers to people buying a car. But if you look at those.
Yeah, we didn't look a ton. I don't think it like the financial barriers necessarily too much of that. I think we talked a little bit about, you know, the price barriers to like some of them, but I don't think anyone we were talking to was going to be like necessarily struggling to buy an electric vehicle. At least from
Financial. So you have one person who kind of understood that long term would save money and short term financing doesn't work out.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, I feel like usually for the people that we interviewed, at least, that's kind of what we're going off of. They have a few different factors that are turning them off from getting an EV, but definitely, I think that's a great thing to consider. Yeah.
Thank you, team. Lot of great data and insight there.
I especially liked hearing the summaries of the interviews that you did and some of the commentary. Um, I understand you netted out the three pain points. It seems like price is an obstacle, but as you pointed out, the prices are coming down. I think there's been a lot of publicity of the announcement of the $15,000 EV from BYD in China, and so the trend of reducing those is really down. Also the low maintenance, but the charging availability and the range. Now those are pain points that are ongoing. You know, you deal with the cost of buying a vehicle financing or whatever, but those two pain points are just recurring. And I could relate with that, particularly Fisher was talking about her mom and so forth. Those are very real. When you're driving a gas vehicle, often you'll see a highway sign that says no gas for the next 40 miles or something like that. So it made me wonder if there is something similar to that that could make sense to try and ease the stress. Nobody wants to be stressed out when they're driving every time they get in the car. So whether there could be that type of information to try and remove the friction on understanding, you know, where are the charging stations, how much further, maybe or something, a resource that would index all possible options for charging, you know, on a wide area basis. Is that something that you came across?
Yeah, we did. I mean, I remember at one of our meetings, we were looking at, all right, let's say I'm driving. I was looking at the example of my aunt who's driving from Olathe to Lake of the Ozarks. I was like, all right, how am I going to go find this information? I look it up on the internet and we go on to PlugShare. I think it was just the first website that kind of pops up for looking at the charging stations. And it's not necessarily, yeah, PlugShare right there. It wasn't necessarily the easiest to use for me, at least. It was kind of struggling with like, all right, if I want to go here to here, just not necessarily as easy as obviously what we're used to, which is I drive, there's going to be a gas station. So just kind of getting over that hurdle and trying to plan for that aspect of the trip. And then also going into Google Maps, it is kind of difficult to, you know, first I plug in the route. Now I have to hit under gas, you go to electric charging, trying to find that. It was really tough. And then now that you kind of bring it up, you know, there's a gas sign at every intersection at the US, right? Every whole road is going to have the signs for the gas. And I don't really know what that exactly looks like for the electric. Yeah.
It's the problems are not new. They just come up in a different way. And it kind of reminds me, before we had GPS, AAA was a very valuable resource, and people, especially people that traveled a lot, were AAA members. You know, it removed the risk of something happening and being stranded, but also they had resources to help you map your trip out, so that you had the security that you knew exactly what was going to happen. You kind of eliminated the risk and uncertainty and so forth. Maybe an organization like AAA could be a partner. You know, we talked about other types of partners. The resellers are not necessarily on board at this point, but there are other types of partners that probably have a lot of affinity. Is that something that has come up? Other types of affinity partners that could help tackle the, you know, these pain points?
I don't think we really got to that point during our meetings. That didn't come up, but I think that would be a really great thing to look at.
Yeah, well, it was all your research is what these things just came to mind, thinking of them, you know, what you discovered and how do you solve for those things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to me, just like think about it, it starts with just like the signs on the side of the highway that say there's a gas station here. Because a lot of the electric charging stations, it's not a full gas station with a convenience store. You know, it might be at the mall down the road or something like that, and that's not going to have a sign that's going to have hey, look, there's an electric vehicle charging here, and then it might be a little confusing to get to. So I think just general, like, also like interstate signs updated with where's the electric vehicle charging.
Just one more question from me, is the comparison of the product life cycle of a gas vehicle versus an EV. And you can look at the driving behavior of the gas vehicle. So the super users, they keep a car until they run it in the ground, and how does the life cycle of a gas car compare with an EV?
Well, or
Yeah, well, I know from my parents, they recently bought a Subaru Outback, a 2023 Subaru Outback, but they also have a Lexus IS 300 from 2002, which is my dad's baby. He wanted it, like, he tries not to drive that car as much as he can. So I feel like if people have more, like, a lot of people have a daily driver car, and then if the household has more than one vehicle, they may have another car that they try not to drive as much. At least, if from my perspective. Yeah,
That's a good point.
yeah,
Could be a complementary, it's not.
yeah.
see if we could, I don't know how to check if there's any other questions on. Do you know how to?
Maybe I'm gonna chat, or we can just ask people to unmute if they have a mute.
Z wants to say something.
Yeah. Another point too. So one of the people that I interviewed, she drives a Tesla, and something that came up was as far as like lifestyle and life cycle goes. So for instance, like my Jeep, I have to take it in for maintenance like every 3 to 5 months. Whether it's for like oil or leakages or brakes, whatever. Like my Jeep's been through a lot. So like I spend a lot of time and effort just maintaining it. Whereas like with her Tesla, she's had it for about 2 years now, I think. She's only ever had it taken it in like once. And it was just for like an abnormal thing. Like normally you don't have to take it in as much. So like something that I've noticed just after like speaking with a lot of electric vehicle users, is that it's a lot easier to maintain an electric vehicle because you don't have to spend so much time and energy worrying about the maintenance that would come with a gas vehicle like I do. So like that's another point that I saw too.
I don't know if there's, I can't tell. Yeah, I don't know how to, I'm not good at this.
I'm not too sure either, actually. Probably helps.
All right. So I believe, yeah, any other questions before we wrap up?
I have one more, go ahead. Especially about an iPhone, one of the selling points of this iPhone, its latest generation or that couple, is that they have this what do they call it, non-Wi-Fi satellite emergency thing where no matter where you are, even if you don't have signal for regular phone or for Wi-Fi, you can use a satellite. So you can understand it. Like send a rescue team. Who do they have? They partner exactly with AAA. AAA will come out and solve your problem, whether it's a dead battery or lockout or whatever it is that you, or if you had a crash, and it's an incredibly strong selling point for not everybody, but people. If you get over, you have people that can be more concerned about that. You go back and people, there's no service and whatever, or you go rock climbing, you have emergency. So maybe it's the same idea with the cars. People have that fear of being stranded. So maybe, if they could partner with like AAA or something like that, to where they can come and give you a jump. Well, be more than jump, it'd be a charge. They'd have to charge your portable, but they can order into your car. So it is possible, it's not very common, but maybe that's something that would help with the long term to relieve some of that anxiety, in addition to be more chargers available. That's an idea I hadn't really thought about. My final comment was about, I really like the advertising work that you did, the creative design of things. That was awesome. Certainly the promotion can make a difference. It's very expensive to educate consumers. It's a big challenge lots of companies face. But you talk about social media, using social media. This is where it's interesting. You can integrate promotion with social media now. That's probably one of the most important trends in marketing. But also, it makes me think of several years ago, there was a tremendously effective campaign that Toyota did to overcome the problems with the airbags blowing up and the safety and so forth. I mean, even the CEO, it's first time ever the CEO of a Japanese company came and testified in front of the Congress to apologize for that safety tragedy. But they created a program called I Love My Toyota. And Z's comment about the Tesla made me think about this, that people are in a position to be tremendous influencers by advocating for brands and for innovative products in social media. And this could be a way of really blowing out the education on a wide area basis. Let advocates do it and use some of the concepts that that you've provided in addition to advertising.
Yeah, I have a few things to mention about that. I think a lot of influencers, especially like the really popular ones, are actually like weirdly promoting electric vehicles by giving them out to followers and stuff. And also, I think Instagram ads are a great way to promote and share information, because especially now, many people don't see ads anywhere else really. I talked to my brother and his fiance, and they pay for all of their subscriptions to not have ads. They don't watch cable TV ever, and maybe they'll see some billboards, when they're driving around. And I can definitely relate to that. So the only place that I really see ads is like Instagram and TikTok. So I think putting the ads on those places where people are watching and they can either stop it and look at the ad or swipe and continue, I think that's a really great way to reach a wide range of audiences. Yeah.
I think that Tesla was brilliant in introducing EVs as $100,000 sports coin, changed the perception of EV as a altcoin, something wow.
For sure.
We've kind of left with the perception that an EV is $100,000 car that the ordinary person can't afford. So we need to do kind of a transition to, okay, EVs are good fit.
Yeah.
I've got probably the cheapest solution here to get it at 125.
Yeah.
I feel like there will definitely, this is, just kind of like beyond like advertising, but just with all the car companies coming out with new EVs now you can get an electric car from basically any car company that there is, any major car company. I think it'll just kind of shift the perception when you see that random person down the street. Oh, you have a Hyundai electric vehicle in your garage. Oh, it's not just a Tesla. It's not just a showpiece. It's not just some fancy car that you have, but just kind of also just seeing that generally in a day-to-day from that random person down the street or your cousin that has one, I think will go a very far ways. One of the best advertising ways for electric vehicles. Because then when you talk to that person, you'll get to know, all right, wait, how do you charge that vehicle? How do you do this? How do you deal with only having 300 miles of range?
Right.
So forth.
Yeah, and so Tesla, I feel like there's a lot of misinformation about or misconceptions about prices, because like Teslas can start at like 32,000, I think, which isn't too far off of what a lot of like current cars are selling at. And also I learned from
40,000.
Huh?
Yeah, price about 40,000.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Tax credit, yeah.
Yeah. But I also learned about like Paramount Motors, which Matthew told me about, which is a dealership that mainly sells electric vehicles. And I looked on their website and they're selling like, let's say, don't quote me on this, but like a 2018 Chevy Bolt. with 25,000 miles for $15,000, which is way, I didn't know that, you know, places like that existed. So that got me thinking that maybe my family and I could actually afford an electric vehicle. So yeah, I feel like we should be spreading and sharing that information about different resources and places out there.
Just actually on that point, so I think there is a deep reservoir of goodwill and positive feeling among drivers towards their EVs and stuff. But I think Tesla's captured that to a little bit, a small extent. But like, how can that broader community be brought into the picture and help with this education effort?
I think by targeting different and specific demographics, like if most super users are rural folk and are right leaning, I personally am not that good at trying to create visuals that would appeal to that audience, but I know there are people that are. And if the super users are blue collar people trying to find out what apps they use the most, let's say they're you know, watch YouTube a lot, and there's a few like different YouTubers that they watch frequently that kind of represent that demographic. Like you could look into YouTube advertisements for those specific creators that cater to rural people. So I think there's a few different ways you could reach your target audience, and in general, social media, I think, is the best way to do that. I don't know if that answered your question.
Okay, before we close, I would like to again thank Coltura for a wonderful strategic challenge, very important effort that you're making to drive this. It provided an opportunity for critical thinking, creativity, and communications, and wonderful learning experience. So thanks to Coltura and the team.
Stop the sharing. Okay, I think we're all. Other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, before you turn it off, I want to get a picture of the team and the professor and see in the background.
Yes, we will.
Let's put the thank you slide.